Thank you, Peter, and good morning, everyone. It is nice to see the sun shining and to not have it reflecting off the ground. Right? For those of you who got away for spring break, the rest of us don't like you very much, but that is the way it is. It is really wonderful again this year to welcome the Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley to the Early Bird Breakfast. This has become a tradition in our community to have the Lieutenant Governor here, and it's always well attended and always very much appreciated. We know who he is. Clearly we know who he is. We've elected him twice. We've elected the governor twice. They have strong support in this part of the state and strong support in this room. A few little things that I thought maybe we could refresh on. First, when he was sworn into office, he was the youngest lieutenant governor in the country at the time. I suspect he would tell you he has aged beyond the calendar years that have happened in the few years that he's had office. The governor has not relegated the lieutenant governor, as so often happens, to kind of the peripheral ceremonial kinds of things, but they really have been a partnership together and have worked very hard on some very major issues. Tax reform, repeal of personal property tax, Prop 1, as I'm sure we'll hear a bit about this morning. So they have, the governor and lieutenant governor have been clearly partners in Michigan's transformation. Brian started in local government at the Ionia County Commission. He was in banking for a while. This sort of seems somewhat familiar to some of us, perhaps. Then he ran for state office as a state legislator and served with many people who are, or a few people who are in this room. And then when the governor tapped him to be his running mate, I think there was great excitement among the members of the legislature because they knew Brian as a smart, principled person who they thought would be able to get some things done. And boy, hasn't that happened to be the case. Brian's married to Julie since 1996. They have three wonderful children, and he is probably the strongest Michigan State fan that I know. Every year, I make some comment about ties, and Peter, you screwed it up this year. You got your maize and blue, tie combination on, but Brian's a good sport. I came as many of you know, I'm a Wisconsin native, so I'm a Badger fan by breeding, and I came as close as I could to kind of a Big Ten tie this morning. The Final Four was so good. Up until both Sparty and Bucky ran into the Duke Great Satan. And that was that. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, would you give a very warm Holland, Zeeland, West Michigan welcome to our Lieutenant Governor, Brian Calley.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be back, and yes, that was, being a Spartan, believe it or not, my heart was not broken as much as your heart was broken in the Final Four. We were just happy to be there. What a year it's been, and I thought I'd take just a few minutes to reflect somewhat on how far we've come, and I think it's okay to pause a little bit and to really celebrate that, to consider all the accomplishments that are happening all across communities around our state, really starting in the communities. So you have this better environment created with reduced debt in a simple, more efficient and competitive tax system, a couple thousand rules and regulations repealed over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, and changes in labor law and so forth. The environment better, but we still need people to take a chance, people, entrepreneurs, innovators that take their ideas and take a chance on them. And that's what we see happening across our state today, and resulting in per capita income growth year over year over year. Now we see our unemployment rate continue to drop, now under 6%. First time that has happened since 2001, I guess, 2001. In fact, we were looking up what was going on in 2001, the last time that our unemployment rate was below 6%. By the way, at that time it was 6% and rising. Now it's it's 5.9 and declining, on a good declining trend. MLive actually had the best one I can think of. It's when the iPod came out. Say 2001, the month that our unemployment rate was this low was when the iPod came out. And and those are almost obsolete now, really. When you think about, though, how much or how long ago that was. And it's really the work that people like you, but all across our state, are doing, and taking the best advantage of a better environment in order to create opportunity and growth and sustainability in our communities. And And this is such a strong community. In fact, I loved when talking about the Boys and Girls Club and the idea that, yeah, you have high graduation rates, but there's still some that aren't. And so that's the sign of a strong community, when you never really arrive. It's this attitude of continuous improvement. We can always do better. We can always get to that next level, that next step of making improvement. And that's where we find ourselves today in Michigan. If you were to go back 4 or 5 years, there are a lot of people that, or 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 years, there are a lot of people that would have really loved to have the type of economic condition that we have here in Michigan today. But now that we're here, the attitude needs to be, it's time to take the next step. And what do we need to do in order to bring our state to the next level? So I wanted to talk about a couple issues in particular. First is going to be infrastructure. Now, infrastructure that is the heaviest lift that we've taken on ever since we've been in office, and we've taken on some really heavy issues. And you think about just the size and the scope of the things that have moved through the process that a lot of people thought were impossible before have been accomplished and are working out throughout our state in creating this better economic climate that we're experiencing. But the one thing that is really holding us back today, probably more than anything else, is the condition of our infrastructure. Now, the narrative around Proposal 1, which is that it's complicated, and I want to push back on that some and explain that it's actually, what's complicated is what we do today. And if you think about it like tying a knot, so if you have a knot and you try and write instructions, how do you untie the knot? The instructions are kind of complicated. But once you untie the knot, what you're left with is very simple. And that's Proposal 1. Today, the way that we fund our roads is extremely complicated and very inefficient. Our Constitution requires that about half of the money of the gas tax, half of the taxes charged on your gas, our Constitution requires gets spent on something else other than roads and bridges and infrastructure. What Proposal 1 says is no longer are we going to do part by percentage and part by gallon sold and part to roads and bridges and part to schools and part to local governments through revenue sharing. What Proposal 1 says is we're doing away with all that, and instead we're going to have this system. You ready? Everything paid at the pump constitutionally guaranteed to go to roads. Sales taxes go to schools and local governments. That's the basis of Proposal 1. That's what we're left with. We untie the complicated system that we have today, and we're left with a straightforward system, everything paid at the pump, constitutionally guaranteed to go to roads. Then schools and local governments are covered by the sales tax. And if you were to start from zero, if you were to start without the legacy of a system that was kind of cobbled together over the course of generations, well, this is a much more straightforward system that is much more similar to what you see in other places. Talk about a couple of the other issues. First of all, the cost of the status quo. Our most expensive cost, by far, our most expensive cost is the status quo for a couple of different reasons. First of all, we do have, and by the way, great example, I want to take you on the road with me. It's a little more concise than I am. I'll take a few notes on the Proposal 1 description there, but we do have a debt problem from the past. Proposal 1 solves the debt problem. We would not be able to overnight flip the switch and be able to handle as many projects as Proposal 1 would cover. In the first 2 years, more of the money goes to paying off the road debt that has accumulated over the past. See, a lot of people look out there and they say, you know, I don't like these roads, but if we do nothing, they'll stay how they are today. That is not true. If we do nothing, our roads will get significantly worse. Why is that? Because we do not borrow anymore. And that's one of the things that we consider to be an unacceptable option. The road system that you are driving on today was built on borrowed dollars, on generations of politicians in the past that could not figure out how to pay for roads and bridges, and so borrowed money. Here's the problem. Now, you heard in my bio at least a hint that I was a banker before. That's what I did for a living before I was before I held political office. It's this pesky thing about borrowing money. You have to pay it back. And that's where we're at today, where the first 235 million or so, depending on the year and the maturities, of the gas taxes collected today do not go to fix our roads. They go to pay for loans, bond payments, and debt payments of road projects that happened many years ago. M6 is just one example of roads, and not just new roads, just road repairs, road reconstructions, money borrowed. So today, not only, so picture we built roads on this much money each year, but part of that was borrowed. We don't borrow anymore, so this is how much is actually there. But not only are we not borrowing, but now we have to make the loan payments. So actually this much goes to our roads. That's why our road system will get worse without some sort of a solution. How about the budget itself? Why can't you find a couple of $1 billion more within the existing budget? We've actually taken, we've found over the course of the last few years, $700 or $800 million in other places to move toward our road projects. That is not a consistent, ongoing guarantee for our roads. We have found efficiencies and made cuts and reductions elsewhere. We've taken growth from elsewhere and dedicated it toward fixing our roads. But it's not enough to do the type of maintenance that is required to make the assets last longer. We have harsh winters in our state. We have a high water table in our state. It's one of the things that makes it unique and wonderful and amazing. It also makes it much more expensive and much more important that we maintain the infrastructure and continue with the maintenance a maintenance schedule on the infrastructure. But today, after all the money is gone, much of the maintenance is never done. And so we have faster deterioration in our roads. Just in our I roads and M roads, if we were to pass Proposal 1, we will keep them at a serviceable or a good level perpetually. If we wait 10 years, and that will cost, in terms of the amount of money we're going to put into those roads, we'll put about $1.3 billion or so, depending on the wholesale price of gas, but about $1.3 billion a year into our infrastructure system. So we can either do that, if we do nothing and wait 10 years, the cost of just our trunk line system. These are our I roads and our M roads, not your local roads, which are in worse shape. But just our I roads and our M roads, $25 billion. That will be the cost, because we will go from having to repair to having to rebuild. And so the expensive option is the status quo. We also know, as the newest report says, and I haven't vetted all these numbers out, but the newest report on the added cost per vehicle in our state because of the condition of our roads is over $500 more. Over $500 more per year that we pay to operate a vehicle in this state because of the condition of our roads. There were previous estimates in previous years when our roads were better that still had the number at very high, at over $350 a year. But as our roads deteriorate, those costs continue to go up. The high cost option is doing nothing. Now what about alternatives? What's Plan B? It's hard for me to remember Plan B because that was like 5 years ago, right? So we're way past Plan B. The reality of the situation, there's been a lot of ideas put on the table. I've never seen an idea get passed. I've never even seen an idea get close to getting passed since I've been involved in the political system, and that's since 2007. This has been a top issue that everybody has recognized as a serious problem, at least since then. I can personally vouch since then. But assembling or coming to a solution that at least half of the House of Representatives and at least the Senate, half of the Senate and the governor can all agree on has been very elusive. This is one that did receive that type of support. In fact, it received over 2/3 support through a very bipartisan process. Let me address a couple of other issues with Proposal 1 that folks have raised. How about there is additional money that ends up going to schools and local governments? First of all, local governments have a lot of roads to maintain too. So little extra money going to local governments in order to do the things that they do. Roads would be part of that, of course. It might be fire protection services, it might be policing services that money goes to. It's just through revenue sharing. It's because we chose to go to an even sales tax of 7% instead of doing a revenue neutral odd number. Like we could have picked out like 6.81529 and tried to get it exactly, but that would have left us with a very bizarre sales tax. It's just a matter of going to an even sales tax. That's why schools and local governments get a little more than what they get today, is because it's an even sales tax number. Why is the earned income tax credit a part of it? So the part that would normally have gone to the general fund out of the sales tax collection formula, we're sending that back to low-income workers through the restoration of the earned income tax credit that we cut back in 2011. And that's because the sales tax is generally accepted to be, or considered to be, a regressive tax, a tax that impacts low-income people more than high-income people. And so part of the support in putting this deal together was to make sure that low-income workers, not welfare, not people that don't work, low-income workers. You cannot get the earned income tax credit unless you work. Low-income workers will receive an increase in their earned income tax credit to eliminate any increase they would have experienced because of Proposal 1. So that's it. That's the proposal put together. Here's the bottom line: fixes our roads. I mean, that's the key here. There's a lot of discussion around a lot of different things in Proposal 1. Let's boil it down to something real simple. It actually does fix our roads, and it got passed. There are some things that have received passage in one house or the other that wouldn't have actually fixed our roads. And there are other things that are ideas that could fix our roads, but they could never get passed. And so we have to deal with the reality. At the end of the day, it's our responsibility to govern, and we have to fix these roads and these bridges, and we cannot afford to leave this on the next generation. All right, second issue I want to talk to you about is disability employment. So Justice Bernstein and I have formed a partnership. We've been going all over the state in order to promote the concept or the notion of hiring more people with disabilities. All kinds of disabilities. The statistics are frankly quite alarming when you consider in this day and age how many people with disabilities have higher education, have skills, and have strong work ethics, and yet remain unemployed. At the same time, I hear more often than anything else that employers are having a hard time finding the right people with the right skills to fill the job. And sometimes, as we heard this morning, sometimes the only skills required are pass a drug test and show up for work. And yet, the unemployment of disabled individuals is many, many multiples higher than the general population. And I think that there's an opportunity here to bring together that demand and that supply. A lot of times people don't even really think about it. Like when you're out thinking about recruiting or filling a position, the idea of hiring a person with a disability, whether it's an intellectual disability or a physical disability, that this can be a scary thing because, what about accommodations? What do accommodations look like? What do we have to do in order to make the accommodation right? It's the interesting thing, though, is that oftentimes the accommodations you make for a person with a disability end up helping everybody in the entire organization. But what you find when you give somebody a chance, and if there is somebody, and I would love to know about it, by the way, if there's anybody in the room here that has taken that chance and said, I'm going to give somebody with a disability an opportunity, because it's a group of people that rarely get a chance. And it's not that people actively shut the door on people with disabilities, it's just that we have systems that are built for able-bodied people. And it's just difficult to navigate and to get into that mix. And so you have to be intentional about it if it's going to happen. But what we're finding are more and more employers that are saying, like, where have you been all my life, once they take a chance? And they find out that this is a group of people that are so thankful that somebody gave them a shot that they're not going to mess it up. They're going to work harder than anybody else. They're going to work smart. They have to work smarter than anybody else because they're starting out behind. And so why not take a chance? We have an agency within the new Michigan Department of Health and Human Services. It's a combined department that we have. It used to be DCH and DHS. Put them together with the idea that we build services around people as opposed to expecting people to conform to the artificial constructs of government programs. One of the things that we do is Michigan Rehabilitation Services. And this is, they work with people with disabilities and with employers that are interested in hiring people with disabilities. And so I just want to ask you to think about that, whether it makes sense to reach out to MRS and say, you know what, I've been having a hard time filling some spots. Let's get together and talk about the people that you have that need an opportunity. And maybe it's the sort of thing that requires an advanced degree. Guess what? Over 40% of people with disabilities have at least some college or a college education, yet most are unemployed. So whether it's something that requires a degree of some sort, or if it just requires somebody who's going to show up to work every day on time and put everything into it, that there is a connection to be had here. Now from a standpoint of, everybody in the room probably knows somebody with some kind of disability, and you'll have something in your mind about what that means or what it looks like or what limitations might be. But I want you to consider, I want everybody in the room to just think about for a minute, what is the thing that you're worst at? What is the thing that you're just, for whatever reason, you're no good at? If you think of that thing right now. And what if that was the thing that defined you? What if that's the only thing that people thought of when they thought of you? When people thought of your capacity, of your ability to make a difference in your community, what if that one thing that you were really bad at, what if that was the only thing that people considered about you? Would that be a fair representation of your ability to make a difference? Would that be an accurate depiction of what your capacity to produce would be? Of course it wouldn't. It'd be very unfair for somebody to say, what's the one thing that you're not very good at, and say that's the thing that defines you going forward. But that's what we do to people with disabilities, is that there's an obsession on this thing that is a limitation, as though we don't all have limitations. And by the way, we're all only temporarily abled. If you live long enough, you're going to experience disability. And so there is an attitude that I think that we need to shift or adjust toward looking past disability and seeing ability. Taking a chance. I think about this difference, and it's hard to do. Even from, as a lot of you probably know or have heard, I have a daughter with autism. And it's hard not to have that be like the thing that she's about. And it's hard sometimes not to have lower expectations, even when you're purposely trying to have high expectations and to help and to believe in the future. Because it's just this mindset that we have. Now to tell you a story though about when she came home with this, with the report card, and this was a few years back. Now reading is very important in our household. We read with our kids every single night. Every night. Never fail. And then they read to us, and reading is a big deal in our house. And so my daughter came home at the end of her first school year. And the report card said that she was level 1 to 2 in reading. And I had to look up what that meant, because when I was in kindergarten, it was like needs improvement, satisfactory, or very good. And I know what these things mean, but what is level 1 to 2? So look at the key, and at the end of kindergarten, she's supposed to be at level 4. And I thought, well, I was actually quite disappointed about that, because she had been doing pretty well at home. But I thought, well, we'll get in touch with the teacher. We'll talk about what's been happening and what the limitations are, and how we can move and get things, how we can improve things over the summer. We'll put a real aggressive plan together to ask the teacher, what is it exactly she's struggling with, or what are the scenarios, and let's understand this better. And she said, no, she's not at level 1 to 2. She's at level 12. Level 12. And so I went back and I looked at the report card. You know what it said in the box? It said 12. It didn't say level 1 to 2. It wasn't written funny. I know what 12 looks like. I have worked with the number 12 all my life. And yet somehow because it was my daughter with autism, like my brain was programmed to think that it has to be less, like she would be behind. And the tragedy of it is that if my son, who had come home with the exact same report card, I would have looked at it and saw the number 12. And that's the thing that, now if the person who is tied for Reagan's biggest advocate in the world has a hard time seeing past the disability to ability, then how much harder is it for everybody else? So I know that I'm asking a lot when I say we have to look past disability and see ability in people. It won't happen by accident. We have to do it on purpose. And so as we look at this gap that we have and we start working on the people that seem to be left out of opportunity even when things go really well, because you know, like they consider full employment to be 3 or 4% unemployment, but what about that 3 or 4%? What's going on there? And that's what I loved about the discussion. Even when you get to a 90% graduation rate, well, what's going on with the rest of them? And how can we get there too? And that percentage of the population that is still struggling, even when we're growing, right? How can we get to them too? And disability employment is a big part of that. And I know in this part of the state where people generally have charitable hearts, I want to make a point here. I'm not talking about charity. I'm talking about giving somebody a chance who can really contribute. Giving somebody a chance who is left out usually and will make the most of it. Every single speech that I give, people get a dose. No matter what you ask me to talk about, you always get a dose of disability employment advocacy, because I believe that this really will change everything. It will drive change throughout the entire system, both with expectations and in education and transition services. That there are, right now there's this mindset that it's a charitable mindset, which I think is usually good, except that we need to, that's still very disability focused, and how can we focus on ability? And if we can, when we see solutions come out, I know this is the type of community that comes up with solutions. I'd love to see what is possible here, right here in your own backyard, in moving the needle on creating opportunities. So thank you for everything that you do. I want to thank you for your support on key initiatives that the administration has moved forward, and only moved forward because we believe that they're in the best interest of the people of the state of Michigan. And this chamber in particular has been a strong partner in making that happen. And frankly, I'll just say that you've really proved the strategy right. You know, our attitude going in was that if we just have a better environment for success in our state, our people will know what to do. We won't have to direct the economy. It's supposed to go here or there, or do the different types of incentives or credits or whatever, so people know what to do. If we have a better environment for everybody, no matter what you want to do, that we will have a growing economy, that entrepreneurs will start to take risks again. And those risks will result in opportunity, and you've proved that right. So thank you so much for your part in making this such a strong and vibrant community. It makes a difference. It's a shining example for others around the state, around the region, around the nation to look at. And I'll just point out too, I hope that you're paying attention to the amount of notice or notoriety that this area is taking on. You keep on seeing that, you know, all things West Michigan keep on hitting the national radar. You know, these lists of the top this and the top that and the best. I mean, it's hitting the radar. And while, of course, there was no strategy to make, you know, the West Michigan coastline like the best, right? It's always been the best, but people didn't know about it before. But there's so many good things happening here that there are more people noticing all the time, and it's creating momentum. So we need to use that momentum now, put the pedal to the metal, fix the rest of these legacy problems, like with our roads, but put the majority of our energy toward just building the best type of future that we can possibly have. And I know that you'll be a key part of it. Thank you so much for your invitation to be back again.